Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, JCM Berne. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Daniel. Honored to be here.
Yeah, it feels good. Like I said, you're my first interview after, I think I've actually had like a 2-week break. So
Oh, nice.
it was nice for a while. Then I was like, I got to talk to somebody about writing.
Enough of the lake and the fishing. Back to work.
Well, it was nice, but it's like my wife, she's like, "Oh, you really got to get this novella done." I'm like, "I really do." So I like doing interviews before my, writing time because you guys always just give me the best ideas, and it gives me a really good motivation, to write, and it doesn't allow me to waste any time. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
so and so just did this cool thing or whatever, and
Yeah.
it gets me going. So
listen to writing excuses before I write, like an episode or two, like 15 minutes, get me revved up, go right into it.
That's a good idea. I actually didn't consider that, so I'm gonna steal that.
All yours.
Like during my weeks, because usually I do these on the weekends. So that's
all yours. When you win a Hugo, just say thanks to Joe for this idea.
Oh, I got you.
Put me in your speech.
Yeah. That's fair. I'll be up there.
Funny story. I got to interrupt you. Funny story.
No, go ahead.
I could go on tangents. My college roommate won a Hugo Award.
Who was that?
John Chu. He won a Hugo Award for a short story. I forget the year. And we haven't talked in like 20. I mean, he's a lovely guy. We just, college roommate, you lose touch.
Yeah.
Great guy. But at one point, I was looking at like the Tor.com website, and they mentioned him. Our own. And I'm like, could be the same guy? Because it's not a unique name. Look him up, same guy. Like we've been in touch on Twitter. But so I always say, I want to put that in my author bio. Former roommate of Hugo Award winning. Like that somehow makes my book better, right?
You should put that on the cover. I would so do that.
Neither of us wrote fiction at the time. Like we don't have like deep comment. Not like we met at a writing workshop or met at like studying English. He was a computer engineer and I was a philosophy major. Like it was.
Oh, that's crazy.
Nothing to do with writing science fiction, but that's my funny story.
That's crazy.
And now you know my good, interesting fact about me. Now we're basically done. The rest of the interview is just like
quickest interview ever.
Extras, just extras. Yeah. Not important.
Definitely put that. I would totally put that on my book cover.
I was highly tempted. Yeah, really I was highly tempted, but
that's hilarious. That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, that actually leads us into the first question. Actually, what has your writing journey been like up until this point?
So I think I'm like a third of your guests. I started writing fantasy based in my D&D setting.
Oh,
right.
Cool.
After playing Dungeons and Dragons, so I think I've heard many other people.
Oh yeah. It's like half and half, I would say.
Yeah. So I wrote a book. I wrote a couple books. I sent one to Tor. It got rejected. I didn't really know what to do. This was like the late 90s. I didn't really know how to like move it forward, make it better. Form a writing group. I didn't understand how the process worked. So I just kind of put it on a shelf and went about my life. I went, found a regular job. I did it again and again. And then in 2020, I just said, I'm just going to write. And it was just about finding something a little more, a little fulfilling, I guess, in a different way than my day job. It's a different sense. And I wrote this book and I really didn't know what I was doing, but I had friends who really liked it. And some people read it who weren't really my friends, like people who knew friends of friends or whatever. And they're like, this is really good. And I was okay. Well, I should really learn what I'm doing. If I'm and try to do this the right way. Yeah. So then I started like really like listening to like Brandon Sanderson's lectures on YouTube about writing and like podcasts and reading books on craft and trying to like I had no idea what like a 3-act structure was. I had no idea when I first so the book that if you buy Wistful Sending now, it's a complete rewrite. Same story, but like I literally touched every sentence. Because I didn't know what things like passive voice were or, and so I spent like a year. COVID helped because I was home, nothing else to do. Man. But I spent like a year like trying to learn how to write. And I re-released the book, got a better cover, got an editor. Editor was a huge help because she did a developmental edit and a line edit. And she really helped, flesh out all the places where, a lot of my weaknesses that I wouldn't, you don't necessarily see yourself. And I re-released the book and got pretty positive feedback. And then I thought, well, now I'm hooked. So now I'm committed. And the way my sort of my brain works with the stories is, I'm trying to write the kinds of things that I love to read.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, I'm the audience for this book, 100%. Like, there's no part of me that's like, oh, kids will like it if I do this. Like, it doesn't occur to me. I don't work that way. Maybe I should, but I don't. So, what I love is I love series. I love like the Dresden Files. I'm a big comic book fan from way back, where you have a comic book character, they go on for hundreds or thousands of issues, story after story, but the stories are self-contained, maybe one or a few. So I was like, this is what I want to do. So I've been book 3 is still being edited, but is coming out sometime in the next few months once I get my cover. And I have lots more planned. So, it's whether other, and enough other people have enjoyed them that I'm like pumped to keep doing them. But yeah, so I learned a lot. I'm still learning, still getting like feedback from people. And then I entered SPIFFBO,
Oh,
which
that's
was
awesome.
it's funny, you get so much attention for entering SPIFFBO. All these people like, oh, I want people, like reviewers will say, I want to read all the SPIFFBO entries and review them myself. I want to see if I agree. And it's all this attention. Like, it's kind of amusing, because to get into SPIFFBO, all you need to do is set an alarm on a particular day.
Yeah.
Right? You just have to get up and like submit the book. Like, you don't, to be one of those 300 people, there's no screen other than you had to get up that day and submit your book. So I'm like,
Yeah.
it's very gratifying that I'm getting all this attention, but on one hand, it's also like, I don't know that I deserve it. We'll see. Hopefully I do, hopefully the book does, but and then so since the book was released, it's just been about trying to get it into people's hands, which
Yeah.
is really tricky. I don't think my book,
Yeah.
it's really, I don't think my book blurbs well, right? People hear superheroes and people hear, superhero sci-fi type stuff, and they tend to think it's either written for kids or it's like a deconstruction of the genre where you're really, making it very grim and like gritty and like
Yeah. Well,
they're
that's the current
anti-hero.
market, right?
Yeah, like Watchmen. Like, if you're writing for adults, they think it's something like Watchmen or The Boys, which I love. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love
They
those
want
things.
classic 90s, like 80s and 90s, like your Lois and Clark adventures, like your
Yeah.
TNT, like your Dean Kane, like, like they're that's what my friend was saying too. Like, they're not I'm not the gritty, I think that's why Marvel's done so well, is they didn't do the DC approach. They stuck with the original source material and tried to make it light and fun and, superhero genre, not a horror movie.
It's 100%. Marvel makes heroes who are trying to be heroes, and whether they're flawed or not, they're trying to be heroes. And for the most part, they make things better.
Yep.
For the most part, it's a hopeful, upbeat. It's like I don't know what the right word is, but the opposite of grimdark, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yep. I
And
agree.
and that's what I'm trying to write. And it's hard to sell that to people, because I'm also not trying to write this for children. Like, that was never my goal. And it's not, I don't have a lot of adult content. Like, it's not a lot of explicit sex or graphic violence. That's not what makes it adult. But the themes are about, redemption and
Yeah.
morality and doing the right thing. And it's themes that will most, Jordan Brooks, who's on Twitter, and does book reviews, was talking about, and someone asked, and he was like, yeah, you should probably be 16, or something, to really appreciate all the stuff. And I think that's fair, but it's hard to blurb that, it's hard to make it not sound like I'm writing a cartoon for 8-year-olds, which,
Yeah.
nothing wrong with cartoons for 8-year-olds, but don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
that's what you want, that's what you're writing, that's fabulous, but that's not what I'm doing. So now it's just been trying to get it into people's hands, and I figure people read it, and then they'll be able, reviewers and booktubers and book bloggers are better than me at explaining, is this good and for whom? That's really what they do. So I'm trying to get it in people's hands, and it's been very fun and gratifying.
I was just thinking, because like I just got done with Jeffrey H. Haskell's, who I had on for season 1. His why am I blanking?
I can't remember.
Arsenal series.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
read book 1 of Arsenal. And that
I
was just,
listened to that interview.
oh yeah, I was like, oh man, I really liked it. And I got really into it. So that's like your book. I was like, oh, I really, I've been trying to review people from season 1 who have been on the show. And I got some people for season 2. So for your first book, I was like, okay, I was like, now I need another superhero fix. And but yeah, I was like, I still feel like I discovered Jeffrey probably about 6.5 years ago for the first time, on Lindsay Broker and Joe Lalo. like their podcasts, and like their marketing podcast for fantasy and sci-fi. And I just thought it was interesting because, you know, that was when the Marvel movies were first really coming out and becoming popular. But I still feel like the things that he talked about the superhero genre for books back then, almost 7 years ago, still apply today. I still feel like, you know, it's still not a saturated market in terms of novels, you know, and I think I do feel, I was just talking to a buddy of mine about this. I do feel that the genre for you guys is going to pick up because I think people are kind of getting over the Marvel thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like I haven't seen Doctor Strange yet, but that's at least what I've heard. And even with the recent Thor, which I'm really excited to go see this upcoming weekend, but it just seems to me like people want a certain fix, and I think the market's going different for the movies, and I think it's going to leave people for a hankering, like it does for me, for some of the comics and the books. That's my feeling, at least.
Hope you're right.
And that's my hope, because I literally was like, after I got done, you know, with Arsenal, I was like, I have this old superhero that, you know, I was originally going to be an illustrator. My friend and I really wanted, called The Vengeance, and I started thinking about it the other day. I was like, yeah, it'd be kind of fun to do like a 250-page book, you know, about this character. And it really got me interested in, you know, in the genre, you know, like writing it and stuff. But I do like, you talked about blurb though. Like, I loved your blurb. I have to say.
Okay, that's great.
And I just went and reread it yesterday, actually, in anticipation for this interview. And when you said, you know, like a mix between superhero and sci-fi, that got my attention, as, you know, a second time as a reader. And I was like, a lot of people don't portray, you know, their superhero book like that. And that to me was really, I was like, yes, like that's cool. I like combinations. I don't know if, you know, some people in the audience are like, oh, we're tired of him saying it. But I like the mixtures. Yeah, like I like my historical urban fantasy, not just, you know, I like different. I like Star Wars because that's probably why I've been ruined for books and movies and things, because, you know, that's a fantasy and a sci-fi setting, you know. And I think I love the combination.
Superheroes have always been sci-fi.
Yeah,
Superman was an alien sent here in his spaceship.
I never thought of it till you said it on your blurb.
Right? Superman was sci-fi. Iron Man is sci-fi. The Fantastic Four.
Captain America, Spider-Man.
Right? Captain America, Super Serum. The Human Torch. The original Human Torch was Captain America's, like, fought with him in the World War II comics. Different than the Fantastic Four Human Torch. He was an android.
Flames, right?
I don't know what the Submariner was. I never quite. They made him a mutant like recently, but I don't know what he was originally. I guess he was just from Atlantis, so whatever. But the Human Torch.
But they had that advanced technology, though. You know.
Yeah. So superheroes have always been sci-fi, and then I don't know when it started, but they definitely became fantasy as well. I know definitely by the late 60s or 70s, you definitely had magic. Right? Yeah. Doctor Strange, and you had.
A lot of Superman had magic. He faced a lot of sorcerers, because that was like one of his like weaknesses from the. I think my friend he made a good point. The Silver Age, you know, I think it was the Silver Age comics, particular for DC, because, you know, you had Dr. Fate, you know, and then Marvel, of course, did Moon Knight, who had, you know, back in the day had a little bit more of the mysticism and stuff.
But they had mysticism even earlier, like even in the pulps, like Doc Shadow. Didn't he?
I didn't even
cloud men's minds.
Yeah, I didn't feel like a hypnotism.
But they made it. It wasn't just hypnotism, right? I think they hinted that it was something he learned in Asia.
Yeah.
And it was magic. It was, you know, it wasn't tossing fireballs magic.
Yeah,
but you know,
it wasn't shadow.
yeah. But that's the roots of superheroes. The superheroes have always been science fantasy. You know, to me, science fantasy is just where you have science fiction elements and fantasy elements. You've got these impossible things. You're saying these impossible things are from technology, like Iron Man's armor is technology. You've got these other impossible things, which is Doctor Strange creating a portal. That's magic. When you say it's magic, you're making a fantasy. And when you say it's technology, you're making science fiction. You can make other distinctions, but to me, that's what it is. And superheroes, generally speaking, are science fantasy. They're just both, because you have Doctor Strange standing next to Iron Man doing stuff, and I'm like, well, this is what I love. I love all these things. I love guys in power armor, and I love people tossing fireballs around, and this is what I grew up loving. So you put them together, and you add a cape and some spandex, and you have superheroes. So that's what I write.
You know? I think you just blew my mind twice in the same like weekend, because I didn't.
You are welcome.
I didn't consider superheroes and sci-fi so closely related. but I also didn't even think about the reason that maybe so many people like myself love superheroes so much, particularly like, well, like Doctor Fate and Doctor Strange, was that it is fun, right, to have the sci-fi and fantasy mixed together.
Look,
Everybody gets what they want. That blows my mind. I never thought of that.
I mean, look, there are people who write like very serious science fiction where their whole point is you're
Yeah.
trying to extrapolate some kind of technological advance and how would it change our lives. It's almost a literary thing, and that's lovely stuff. But if you're writing like a space opera or a science fiction adventure or most fantasy novels, you're throwing in the stuff you think is cool. You think it's cool to
Yeah.
have spaceships, slinging lasers at each other and flying around. You think it's cool, giant robots. You think it's cool, wizards like teleporting, and you think that stuff is, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's a perfectly valid reason, but that's why you put it in your book.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if I can think these things are cool, like I think giant monsters are cool, so you know what, my whole book is set on a space station that's floating above a planet that is completely like filled with giant like kaiju, right? Like Godzilla-sized monsters, because why not? It's my book. I want Godzilla-sized monsters on there. I'm gonna slap them in there, and some besides I needed something that could kind of kick my hero's butt,
Yeah.
because you don't want your hero to be like too tough. That's a Superman problem, right? But
Yeah.
who's so put some giant monsters on it. Great, they're in there. They so yeah. I
Well,
just
it's
like
like,
throwing that stuff in.
it's like Batman, like the hero's only as great as his villains. And I think that's why
Yeah,
everybody loves Batman so much, is he's got the greatest rogues gallery of all time. I mean,
yeah, yeah. Oh
I,
yeah,
yeah.
oh yeah.
So I do have to say, just real quick, as a plug to comics, so I'm reading the Batman graphic novel. I think it's The Court of Owls, and I just started. And
Uh,
it's interesting because the opening scene is actually Batman in Arkham fighting all of like the rogues gallery
oh
like
yeah.
at once. And then the panel that I just got to is on like page 5, of 5, and everybody's like, "Oh, there's the Joker." Like all the villains, like, "Oh, there's the Joker. You're screwed now." As Batman's beating him up, and then Batman goes, "Are you ready?" And the Joker comes out swinging, and him and Batman are like destroying all the other rogues. And I was just like, I am sold. I was like, I'm gonna read this entire graphic novel, like tomorrow after work.
Yep.
It's just like
Need to
I've
know.
been on like a hot streak right now with graphic novels and comics. I've been reading King Conan. It's the first issue blew my mind, and I'm just like, I just feel like we're in a golden age of writing comics right now. I feel like a lot of them
Yeah,
dipped
yeah,
down, but I felt like they were back up after that 2000 slump that we had. I think they were trying to make too many things similar, and I think now I feel like DC and Marvel were trying to make too many things similar, and now they're going back to what they used to be before that, right? And just telling their own stories. And I
yeah.
feel like it's definitely. I read a one shot where Ra, Damian Wayne, Vampire Hunter, and it was such a cool concept where Dick Grayson gets infected by a vampire, by Dracula, and he
Uh,
takes over Gotham and kills Batman. This isn't a spoiler because it's in like the preview, and it's such a good one shot. I was like, I want a series of this. Like
Give
Damian
me
Wayne,
more.
so cool. Yeah,
Give me
Alfred and
more.
Damian Wayne were just so cool, and it was just it was interesting world building, and I was like,
Yeah,
really cool. But yeah, that it goes back to again where you're taking something that I love, Batman, and then adding in a vampire world, and that was just so it was so interesting. And it's
have you
like
read
yeah,
sorry,
sorry, it cut out for a sec.
have you read Invincible?
No, actually, I actually have the first two graphic novels. I've just
Read
been
them. Read
yeah,
them. It
I
starts
really
off
want to
good
watch
and
the
it gets
show too.
better. And the Amazon cartoon is excellent. It's like slightly better than the comic, probably. I mean, Robert Kirkman worked on the cartoon, but I think
Yeah,
the cartoon really plays as if there were a couple things he wished he had done a little differently and a little
oh,
better in
that's
terms of the
interesting.
pacing, and it feels fixed. It feels
Yeah,
like another draft of the comic. But the
yeah.
comic is excellent, and it was hugely inspirational for my stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Actually,
Invincible,
yeah, I did read the first graphic novel actually.
good.
But I think it was like it wasn't that the one where it was like they brought it back out again. Maybe it was like I think I had like the original one, but then I felt like there were years in between where I never saw anything about it. And then to me, it seemed like they brought it back out again, or maybe they just redid the cover. But I've definitely read the
Yeah,
first graphic novel.
they
Uh, yeah, it
yeah
was really
they released it in like 3 very fat books.
Oh, okay.
The whole run, which is what I have in my closet right now. And it's totally worth it. It's a story. The character grows and changes, and the story ends. There's a real arc to it. But
That's cool.
it's everything I love in that it's an homage to superheroes. It's not a oh, he's actually the main character is a superhero. He can fly and like punch things real hard, and he's trying to do the right thing, and he screws up sometimes and he makes things worse, but in general he's trying to do the right thing, and in general he succeeds and makes things better. And he's surrounded by other characters that are very reminiscent of the kind of things you see in good comics. It's just all excellent. Like at every level it's excellent. In the character development there's some great twists. But it was hugely inspirational for what I did, because I was like, okay, this guy's writing a very, like, it's funny. It's not serious in the sense that it's not, you laugh, but it's very serious in the sense that he's taking the characters and their development and their emotions very seriously. Kind of like what happened with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You had this very silly thing where they're fighting vampires in Sunnydale, California, which sounds like kind of ridiculous, but the characters are treated like their emotional life is treated very seriously. Whatever you think about Joss Whedon, which is a whole different topic we don't need to get into. But if you watch that show, like, the characters are treated like they're trying to make really good, solid characters who felt real, given the context of their ridiculous situation. This is what Invincible does, and this is what I'm trying to do. May not be as successful, but so Invincible is really worth your time.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, cut out again. My computer's just not letting me today. I was gonna say, not as successful as Invincible yet. Just saying.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
You got book 2, right? So 3's on the horizon. So
we're working on it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I really liked your explanation of that. I thought that was really good. I remember really liking the graphic novel. I think I bought it literally like the first one, like the week it came out. Like I remember specifically going and I was like, oh, this looks awesome. The art was really cool. And I remember reading it. And then I think I just dropped off because I was like reading Birthright at the time. And, also, I was just like, that's why I said to my wife, I was like, I was on such a good run that year. And I was like, currently I am. But yeah, that was one I forgot to grab when I was in Michigan.
It gets better. It's definitely one of those comics where I read the first one. I was like, oh, this is good. I'm going to read the second one. I read the second one. By the time I got to like the midway through, I was like, oh my God. And then my mind was blown. But your mind's not blown from the beginning, because part of it, he's setting things up. And, it's very hard to blow someone's mind from the beginning and then have a continuous story that still reads well. 6 years later, because it really was like a 12-year run. He put out like an issue every month for a long time. And that's hard, and it's hard to have character development that like lasts that long.
I remember that being like that. I remember the year it came out. I can't remember the number, but I remember the year it came out, and I remember thinking like this was like, and like I said, there were so many great graphic novels that I had came out that year and that I bought, that were older, where it was like I read Crisis of on Infinite Earths that year. They had done the rerun of that. There was right around that time was 52. Civil War was right around that time. And I just remember thinking like this was one of the better graphic novels like I had ever read. And there were a lot of Star Wars ones at that time. Rebellion was really good. They had a really cool Republic Commando in there. There was all sorts of good ones. So I definitely,
a lot of good stuff.
That's cool though, that knowing that's inspiration for you. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. I in one very specific way, my sort of the setup for my this whole setting is almost straight taken from Invincible, which is so I don't know if you want me to just go on into that, but
go right
okay
ahead.
So basically the setting is you've got it is very much like the Marvel universe. You have Earth, which has like very similar to our level of technology, but there are superheroes running around, but it's roughly present day Earth. But then there are alien planets, and there's lots of people with spaceships flying around, and they don't come here very often. Earth doesn't appear in the first book, but the galaxy's been basically taken over by a race, and they are what's special about them is they're not particularly numerous or tough or anything, but when they breed with other species, they have children who are themselves sterile, why they're different species, but the children have superpowers at a very advanced level, like to the point of being like civilization ending level of power.
Oh, wow.
So they basically, you have these aliens, they come and they live in places like Earth, and they go on or other planets with native populations, and they go on Tinder or space Tinder or whatever, and they find women to procreate with, and they raise children that they know will, once they reach a certain age, have powers, and they raise them. What do you do when you raise? Well, they're trying to raise kids who will love them and listen to them and obey them, and then they recruit them into their army, and this is how they've conquered the galaxy. So our main character, Rohan, is one of them. So he grew up on Earth. His dad is an alien. He knew this at some point. I'm not very specific about when exactly he found out. This might be a story I'll write one day. But he had superpowers. So for a while he had superpowers. He was flying around New York, fighting villains. He had a team and everything. And then at some point he got recruited, left, went to join the military of this alien civilization, was there for a decade fighting, and really fighting for the Empire out of loyalty to the Empire, but also doing things he probably shouldn't have been doing, ending, it's very loosely alluded to in the book. I don't go into details, but you definitely get the sense, he ended civilizations, right? He may have had reasons to, he may have thought it was the right thing to do at the time, but he, killed a lot of people and then got out. And part of the story in the book is you find out in drips how he got out, how he managed to buy his freedom from this. But now he just wants to be a better person and live sort of a more normal life. So when the book starts, he's living on the space station, and he's got a quiet, and he tows ships for a living by hand, which is something most people can't do. But I always like the idea of using your powers in your job. He could become an accountant, but he could also fly and lift out thousands of tons. So you might as well get a job where he's doing that and getting paid really well for it, because it's a pretty rare skill set.
Yeah.
So that's where the hybrid helix come from. The hybrids are these half alien, half different other species, because these guys will go wherever to try to create more soldiers for their empire, and that's the setting. And if anyone has, it's similar to Invincible, because the whole premise of Invincible is this, the Invincible character, his father is an alien, and that's why he has all this alien of a race of very powerful aliens, and that's why he has all these powers. So the difference here is the fathers don't have that level of power. It's only their kids who do, and then they have to sort of treat their kids in this manipulative and controlling way to get them, because it's the kids who in a way really wield the power. And then so he's living on the space station, trying to have a normal life, trying to find a decent cup of coffee and maybe get a girlfriend. And then a wormhole opens up in the system, and a ship comes through full of refugees from they don't know where, other side of the galaxy. This wormhole hasn't opened in thousands of years, and all of a sudden he's in this very quiet, remote, out of the way place, trying to live a quiet, remote, out of the way life. And all of a sudden it's like, well, this very interesting things happens, and everyone's eyes are like, well, what's going on there? And that's where the title of the book comes from, because the station is Wistful. That's her name. The station's in artificial intelligence. She's a person. She talks to people. She's got her own personality and stuff. And she's ascending in the sense that her place in the sort of political sphere of the galaxy is rising, because all of a sudden she's in this very important place, where before it was an out-of-the-way system with no habitable planets. Now it's like, oh, this ancient technology is being reactivated, and everyone's very interested in that. So people come to the station with good and bad intentions, and Rohan gets caught in the middle. And you've got a guy who's like very good at, he's very good at, war. That's what he's been trained to do. Like, he's very good at killing people, but he sort of also doesn't really want to keep doing that, because that's not conducive to having a nice, happy life with a girlfriend and like a place where you can chill out and have coffee. And, he doesn't want to return to that, but he also has to protect everybody he cares about. And that's the tension of the story.
That's cool.
I guess. Oh, I hope so. that was the idea. So the hybrids, that's why the hybrid helix, and then every book I call a turn of the helix, because the helix is kind of twisting and working. Because I feel like the story is always, it's not a linear plot. You're not just progressing. He's not just getting stronger and stronger, or moving in one direction. he's going to go in a direction, try to do the right thing, but he's going to come back because he's going to screw up, or he's going to make a mistake, or he's going to find a new kind of set of mistakes to make. So you might be constantly going up, but you're going kind of back and forth on different like sort of dimensions of action and morality. So that's my conceit. I call it a helix. And then every book is a twist, is a turn of the helix. And if I write a short story, it's just a twist of the helix. So I have a short story coming out with like an early introduction, like 18,000 words. It'll be free on my website as soon as I get it finished.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I call it a twist, the zero twist. And I like, and all the I like titles that have multiple meanings. Right.
Yeah,
so Wistful's the station, she's ascending, but Rohan's position is also climbing because he's becoming the center of attention again for all these different forces throughout the galaxy around this area. He's in the public eye once more where he didn't want to be, and he's feeling wistful about it. Like he's not what he wanted. So it's this double. I have to have two meanings for every title, or I feel like I'm wasting letters. I don't know.
Oh,
it doesn't really make sense. But so that's the setting of the book and know the world. Yeah.
I have to say, so looking at again the first tagline here, I think this is the only thing I read, a superhero space opera for grown-ups. I didn't even read anything after that. I read that and I was like, yep, that's done. I bought it. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I it's funny because I wrote the book, and at every step, even when I was going back and forth with my editor about things, or she wanted me to change things or do things differently, I always felt like I knew exactly what book I wanted to write. Like I knew exactly what the character, like if she said, oh, we should have this character do something different, I knew the answer was no, or the answer was yes, like immediately.
Yeah.
But like then things came up like, what do you want your name to be on the cover? I had no idea. I spent like weeks struggling with like that. Like how do you want to blurb it? No idea. I couldn't, like everything about the marketing, no idea. So it's such a contrast. I knew the story I wanted to tell, but I didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
Everything else is just like torture. Like, oh, I'll try to figure it out.
That's like one of my friends, like I don't even know what book they're on right now, like maybe like book 8 or something. And that's what he was like, I love writing books, and he's quick at it. He's like, but I just hate the marketing aspect. He's like, I feel like you do 2 different jobs at one time. I'm like, well, you're doing like 10 really, because when you really break down everything, it's particularly when you're indie, right? So it's like, you definitely understand
that. Yeah. And I know I thought about getting an agent and trying to go, traditional, but they were all like, find books just like yours and find agents who represent those authors. And I'm like, I can't. If there were a bunch of books like mine, I'd be reading them. I wouldn't be writing.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was trying to do like a novel, like in a tone similar to a good Marvel movie. And if there are books coming out from companies like Tor that are like that, I'm not finding them. Maybe they're there and I just missed them, but I'm not. So I tried a couple agents and I didn't get very far. All the comps, I'm like, all my comps are like comics. The comparison, like, oh, this is like Harry Potter meets Old Man in the Sea or something. But all of mine were like, oh, this is like a movie and a comic book. But literary agents don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell them anything, because that doesn't tell them which publisher to go to try to market this.
No, yeah.
So it's
kind of like I really like the Watchmen, but like I have this idea of like these, I call it like the old gods. So I have like these superheroes who got their powers and stuff, and I like the Watchmen alternative history thing. So I thought of doing that and like having like a totalitarian society ran by an oligarchy of superheroes, and I figured it'd be kind of like everybody loves The Boys and everything, and I'm like, well, it's kind of has that same type of flavor, and then you get these new group of superheroes come in, who are called the New Gods, and then they have to. The old power structure has to deal with these kind of like your thing, like these better superheroes who are younger, who don't have bad reputations. And, then it's all about this war, these 2 warring classes essentially. And then I got a bunch of cool superhero stuff that pops up. But I was like, my friend goes, oh, you should definitely send that to an agent. And I'm like, how do you send that to an agent? How do you send that to an agent? I'm like indie author. I can do that all day. I'm like, but like I think superhero genre in particular is just so hard to.
And you can't call them New Gods or DC will come after you. Didn't Jack
Yeah.
Kirby have a New Gods a team or something? Jack Kirby did everything.
Yeah, but I was, so it's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine about that because I was like, well, because because I said I was like, I think it's like I can use it as a title, but not the group name or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And I was like, yeah, I was like, I'm gonna check into that. So I was talking to a lawyer friend of mine about that. We were seeing just how far down because we're like, can you really do that? Like, like I don't know. Like, he told me it gets kind of interesting with the copywriting. But yeah, it was yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting when you start thinking about, just the superhero genre in particular, because what is there really in terms of traditional publishing besides Marvel and DC books? Like their novelization forms. Like I can't really think of a superhero novel off the top of my head besides that and Watchmen, where they do the movie or the novel adaptation or something like that.
There are definitely superhero novels out from the major publishers.
Okay.
And I'm blanking on the name. I'm blanking on the names, but they're more like literary and less adventure. And there's one series that I think came from a major publisher, which was interesting, where the main character was trans, and when they got their powers, it actually changed their body to match their what they felt they should be in terms of gender. It was kind of neat twist, and I'm trying to remember who published that, but I can't. Or the name. That's terrible. I'm on a podcast and I'm mentioning books and I can't remember the name of the author or the title of the book. I should shut my mouth. That's not good. I'm sorry. If you're listening to this and you wrote that book, I'm so sorry.
We'll look it up. We'll figure it out. I do think it's interesting you said though, because I do think a lot of them are more literary. Like I think that's the thing. Like, and there are a lot too. Like I can't think of one that's like even like the literary ones that are. Maybe I just don't. Maybe I'm just not frequenting with the genre enough for traditional publishing for superheroes. But like I'm thinking of like a Harry Dresden type series traditionally published for superhero genre. I'm like
Steelheart. Sanderson had a superhero series, YA. I think it was like a trilogy. Brandon Sanderson wrote. I think the first one was called Steelheart. But again, the super powered characters were villains, and all of them that it was about defeating them. And again, cool. to me, it was cool. But again, that's a deconstruction. That's turning it on its head. And my whole thing is, I don't want to turn it on its head. I just want to do it. I want to do it not on its head. I want to do it. Put it on its feet.
Yeah.
Like pat it on the shoulder and say, I'm gonna do you the right way.
It's just interesting that you don't have like a for Marvel and DC, to be like the movies to be so popular, and you have the comic book, like out of all the genres or niches that you would think traditional publishing would have, you would think superheroes would be like number one.
Right? Yeah. Marvel and DC are like huge properties, and then like science fantasy in general is not common in the literary world and in the world of books, but like Marvel, DC, and Star Wars are science fantasy. Right? What is Star Wars? Like the Force is magic.
Yep.
And their spaceships are tech, right? It's science fantasy, but it's not that easy to find in the book world, which is weird because I'm like, well, if you're going to emulate anybody genre-wise, why wouldn't you go for those three? But it doesn't seem to be the way it's working. Interesting. So I don't know. I
think we just probably broke. Maybe we broke genres. We broke all the markets.
Yeah.
Now people are all going to be like, oh, we got to write superhero stuff and get traditional.
It's
just weird. Like you have a huge market, and I just feel like I don't know. Like I would read them all day. I buy those Spider-Man ones back in the day. The X-Men ones. My friend, I have so many friends that love the X-Men and Star Trek ones. The novelizations. Like it's just weird that it is weird to me that you don't have more of that type of genre niche for traditional publishing.
Right. No, I agree. So I'm trying. I'm doing my best. I'm writing as fast as I can to fill that corner of the market.
That's fair.
But I'm slow. I can't. I meet people online who are writing like a book a month, and I just can't. Like, there's no way. I'm hoping to try to hit like 2 a year, but that's my goal. But right now I'm not even doing that. So
I know that feeling. I keep getting
Yeah.
distracted by my life, so I definitely.
Yeah, yeah, I have a day job.
Yeah, yeah,
I would say for better or for worse, but really it's for better because writing's not paying all the bills.
yeah,
I have
yeah,
a day job and it takes time, and I got kids, and a wife. I've got other responsibilities. So
yeah. That's why I'm trying to bust out as much this summer and before my baby's born, because I'm like, I know after that, I'm a teacher too, so I'm like my friend said, she's like, you got to get prepared now. She's like, you got to start, pre-prepping and maybe get some better outlines. And I've been trying the last like year and a half to get my habits down a little bit
yeah,
better.
yeah.
So yeah, I definitely understand that.
Yeah, it's not going to happen after they're born, man.
Yeah, yeah,
I've had a couple, and it's they're lovely. I love my kids, but it's a lot. It's a lot of like lost sleep and a lot of work.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but
yeah. um yeah, I felt like we covered quite a bit there.
I have no
A lot
idea.
of interesting topics came up that I think were a lot more interesting than the questions that I came up with. Um, yeah, but how many books do you plan in your series, and did you decide on a number yet, or you just kind of?
So my books are standalones, right?
Oh, okay.
Each book is a contained story. Whatever main villain is, it's very similar to like the Harry Dresden novels in the sense that there are long-term storylines. There are characters that appear and the relationships change, and you can tell there's like there are big like conflicts coming on the horizon in later books. But every book really tells a story that finishes, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Right? It's not a trilogy. It's not you finish the first book. The first book is done. You might be like, huh, they made a reference to this other thing. I wonder if that's going to show up later. But you don't have the feeling like you're halfway through a story.
Oh,
So
that's fun.
I intend to keep doing it that way, right? So books 2 and 3 are definitely self-contained. They finish, the story's over, and then there are threads hanging. Threats imply that may come back later, but that's what I love to read. So that's what I'm writing. It's that
Yeah,
simple.
yeah.
And then I have this. I have. Book 4, I pretty much know what I want to happen. Book 5, I have like a loose outline, and then honestly, like I have ideas for things that could happen in the future, and I have a pretty solid idea of how I want it to end. But I joke with people like, oh, it's gonna be 25 books, but I don't have a 25 book outline.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like I'll have that when I hit book 23. I'm
yeah.
not gonna, right. So could it be it's not gonna be 6 or 7 books because I know I can't get to where I want to go. I like the slow reveal. I like when things kind of gradually change over a long period of time, and you get these hints that things are coming, but it takes a while to develop. Um, I like doing that. I like reading that. So will it be 20 books? Will it be 25 books? Will it be like 15 books? I don't know. Um, I plan. I'll write them. One way or another. And that's the beauty of like self-publishing and Amazon. That's the other. Honestly, that was a small part of why I didn't pursue traditional publishing harder, because you go to a traditional publisher and you sell them like, even if you sell them like 3 books and you say, I want to write 25 books about this character, you don't get a promise that that's going to
Yeah,
happen.
no.
No one does. Maybe
Yeah,
Brandon Sanders. Right? I keep saying Brandon Sanderson because he's
yeah.
just a good example for this sort of thing. But almost like Jim Butcher did not get, when the
Nope.
third Harry Dresden came out, he did not get a contract that said you can keep going until book 25.
Yep.
He probably can now. Like now we know.
Yeah, yeah.
But they don't offer you that. And like it's their character. You can't just. But I'm like, if I'm self-pub, I can draw my own covers with a crayon, and no editing, and I can write this thing on an old laptop, and for nothing I could publish all 25 books.
Yeah,
No one
yeah.
can stop me. It's not the way I want to do it. I'd like to sell a few so I can afford like editing and the nice
Yeah.
covers, because the nice covers, I can't I can't do this.
Yeah, sir. Little bit better than a crayon.
I can't do this, right? This will never. I'm not an artist. So I'd like to be able to keep affording, like editing. Editing's really nice. I mean, could I do it myself? Maybe, but anyone who thinks that they can just write a rough draft and publish it, it's going to be good. No, I'm sorry, your first draft, it sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, I don't care who you are.
Second, third, and fourth.
Yeah. That was the one thing, as a writer, that I really didn't understand, was just how bad my first draft was. Like ever, like I didn't realize just how far, because I feel like when you write, you have this idea, this cool feeling and emotion and like a mental picture of what you're writing. And then you write it down. And then every time you read what you wrote, it's reminding you of that cool, so this is so cool because it was a cool idea. That doesn't mean your words are actually communicating that idea to a different person. Someone else reads it and they're like, I don't understand what this means at all.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to learn to read your stuff and go, okay, I know what this means. Like I know what scene this is supposed to be bringing up. But will someone else who reads that get the same image or not? Usually not, right? So it's your first drafts aren't good.
Yeah.
No, but I'm digressing. I'm a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, I definitely think it's important. But that actually leads me to the next question here. So would you say you're more of a planner or a pantser?
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a planner. Like I'm the guy, partially because I tend to have a bunch of plot threads running and I have to wrap them up in a certain way. And if I pants, I don't get anywhere. Like I really have to have a strong idea where I mean, everyone's on a continuum. Like no one's really like a fully up. Everyone comes up with stuff when they're writing that they throw in there and then they adjust their plan as they go. But I'm more on the planning end of the spectrum because I have pretty complicated plots and I really want to make sure. Part of the thing that will bug me as a reader is when like there'll be a plot line and like some other character won't appear for like 2 days.
Oh yeah.
And you can't figure what were they doing? Like why weren't they advancing what their agenda was for those 2 days?
Yeah.
They just kind of disappeared from the story and appeared back when the main character needed to deal with them, but they were gone, and why weren't they making moves?
Yeah.
So I try to be really careful, which involves a lot of writing, a lot of notes, a lot of calendars, so that I can tell you, oh no, this guy was in transit for these 12 hours from here to here. That's how long it takes to get from here to here, and that's why I may not say it in the book, but I have an explanation somewhere of what was going on with that. So I'm more of a planner. I have to be, otherwise I aggravate myself because I'll miss things. And it's not fun anymore,
Yeah. Well, it's not fun when it pulls you out as the reader, but it's also not fun when it pulls you out as the writer. So
yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm a sort of a cantankerous reader. A lot of things will pull me out. Like bad science will pull me out. Like when people don't understand physics, it'll pull me out. So I'm like, so I have to write something that's going to satisfy me. And so it just involves a lot of careful note taking, and a lot of planning. So I'm definitely more of a planner. And the books that I probably like to read the most are usually, not always, but usually written by planners. Or I think some people say they're pantsers, and what they mean is they pants their rough draft, but then their rough draft ends up really being what I would use as an outline.
Yeah.
And they rewrite it so heavily that in effect they're planning. They just, instead of outlining, they actually wrote a first draft.
I think that's a great point. That's what I did for my first fantasy novel, and I would say when I wrote the first draft, it was more the outline, and now my second draft is really my draft one. I think that's a perfect way to describe it, honestly.
I'm in writing groups like on Discord and stuff, and we talk about this stuff a lot, and I'm like, I mean, people who just plow through, if their finished products are really good, they're usually editing a lot. Which is fine. That's a perfectly, I hope I don't sound like I'm criticizing that method, because I'm not. Like that works for you, that's fantastic. It's just not. I'm more of an outline first, and then when I'm actually writing, I actually write. Actually, I find it harder and harder to write because I'm trying to get it perfect the first time through. When I wrote book 3, it was like a struggle because I kept trying to keep making sure my pacing was right and my themes were unfolding right and all the character arcs were working right as I wrote it. And it just made every page just agony. But the advantage was when the first draft was done, it was much closer to being finished. So we'll see. But beta readers liked it. So
that's awesome.
Gotta wait on my cover. Yeah.
The long, lonely wait.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do a different thing in every book, which also doesn't help. Like, I think it really helps if you have a formula and you can write, a sort of a formulaic way, just keep writing similar stuff happening, and the problem is it's boring, so I can't do that. I wish I could. I was like, oh, I could just redo this book and like same basic idea and just write it, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, I call that the Jim Butcher effect. Like after a while, I was like, okay, that's why, like, I got through the first 6 books within like 3 weeks. Then I was like, I just felt like it was like kind of very similar. And
Yeah,
then when when I read book seven, I was like, oh, this is totally different. That's where really for me, I felt like I was starting to enjoy it in a different
yeah,
way.
yeah,
But it was a different pace completely. And I
yeah,
know some people that, you might be like, oh, that's kind of hard in a series, because you kind of go for the familiarity. But I think at times it can help, but also kind of hurt you at the same time.
well, I'll tell you what I did. So my first book, Rohan's on a space station. He's got like a security officer that he works with a lot, who's an empath, who's people like her character. She's very sarcastic, because that's my humor. He's got sort of a population of people around him. He makes friends with the former sidekicks of like another hero that was very famous in their world, who are now older and sort of retired, but they come to investigate the wormhole. Uh, so he's got a cast around him. And then in book two, I sent him to Earth, and his whole cast was like basically left behind. And it's very nerve wracking because people really like these supporting characters. Like, oh, that kid you had in that first book was really cool. I'm like, well, you're not going to see him again for a long time because he's not in book two and he's not in book three. I'm sorry, but I wanted to do something different. I wanted to show the other side of his life and going back to Earth and like seeing people he hasn't seen in 10 years, people he sort of abandoned for reasons, but still people he abandoned and people he may have wronged in the past, and having to try to make up for it and fight, giant sharks. Because I have no idea where that came from. But once I had that idea in my head, I was stuck with it. So yeah. So book two is very different. And book three, we get him back on Wistful.
Oh, that's cool.
And we learn a little more of the backstory. I like deep history. I like having these
Oh,
books
yeah,
where there's
yeah.
this sense of all these exotic things happen, like in the like in book two, like they make references to Atlantis sinking and the
Oh,
remnants of that civilization. It's a very like little piece on the side, but I just like this feeling of like embedded. There's a character she's a dinosaur. She's hundreds of millions of years old, wandering around. So I like that kind of again because I like reading it. I don't know if do you ever read Planetary?
no, but I've heard a lot of people like reference it though.
Really like it, and it has that sense of this deep history.
Yeah,
They run into things with that hint at events that happened a long time ago.
yeah,
That
yeah,
they live in a world where stuff has really been going on. It
yeah.
wasn't just that all of a sudden cool things started happening in the 1950s or the 1960s. It's really been there before. I like that sense, so I try to add it in wherever I can. Doesn't always want to. My goal. It's my
I
goal.
call it the Malazan effect. I feel like that's why Steven Erikson, like, there was something something random that Amanda Rake did, and my buddy and I just we're like, it was so random, but it was such cool. It was a small little fantasy thing, but like he puts his sword, dragon purr, on like an obelisk, and it sucks out part of the souls or whatever to allow him to wield the sword longer. And we were both just like, that's just cool. Like, that's really neat.
Just
Uh,
waiting for someone to read Malazan and some young person
uh,
to pick up like Elric and be like, they stole this. Like, no, 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 the other
yeah,
way around, bud. Well,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
half the fun of Malazan is how he's twisting all these other fantasy
Oh, for sure.
tropes. He's twisting the barbarian, he's twisting
Yep.
the Elric character, and it's wonderful stuff. And we were talking about that before the podcast started, before the
Yep.
recording started, but we both love
Yep.
love
Definitely.
Stephen Erikson.
Definitely been a good time in terms of not just reading, but also the study and the writing. So that's like,
Yeah.
I get like a
Oh,
ton.
yeah. I did a little bit of that, trying to like read Erikson in a way that I could try to mimic it, and I completely gave up. I just don't feel I have that level of, I have a whole theory about like writing, like like it's like I grew up in the 80s, right? 70s and 80s. And I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger movies.
Mm.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger, I don't know if he's an actor, right? But he can play a certain character great.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah.
plays like a certain character, very convincing. He sells his lines. He's believable. He's got charm, charisma. He's great. Could he play another kind of character? Does he have range? Probably not. We've never seen him but he plays that one guy well.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like a really good writer can write a bunch of different styles and voices and do them well. And I'm like, this is the most arrogant thing I'll ever say. And I don't mean it to be arrogant, but I'm like, at best, I'm the Arnold Schwarzenegger of writing, you know, at best I can do one thing. I hope I'm doing it well, but I've got like one voice, one style, and I don't have the skill to like do other stuff. Like you look at like someone like Stephen Brust, and he wrote the Jareg novels, and like he'll write another book and it's like a totally different tone and it's beautiful. Prose is amazing.
I call him the
Totally
Felix
different.
Ortiz of writing, because Felix does the same thing with art and covers. It's like in different mediums and
Yeah. So some people can do that. They have real skill in a
Yep.
way that, you know, and I'm like, you know, you don't necessarily need, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger made great movies, but you just don't want him playing like a different kind of character in your film because he's probably not going to sell it. So that's my Arnold Schwarzenegger theory of writing.
No, that's fair.
Little bonus points.
Well, you talked about Invincible, but are there any other, you know, author, comic book writer, sorry, or artists, you know, or just comic books where after you read them or even just see them, you're like, okay, I got to go right now?
Yeah, I mean, like Rohan was definitely inspired by a bunch of different comics. You know, the visual, the thing that I love about the character. I wasn't really a Superman or a DC fan growing up, but the flying, this sounds so dumb, the flying tough guy. I really got a lot of that from Nova, the Marvel character Nova, who I think they're trying to bring back. I don't even know, but
I like Nova a lot.
Yeah, so the way they drew him in the comics, it spoke to me when I was a kid. And there was a comic called The Griffin. It was a DC comic. It was not set in the main DC universe. It was like a 12-issue limited series. I don't know that anyone other than I read it. I hope one day I become famous so I can tell everyone how great this comic was and someone listens to me and like find, you know, but it was about like an alien race. And what they do is they take humans, and they, for some reason, humans can be turned into like superpowered people through a process that they have. So they recruit humans to be in their military. So you can see these similarities between this story and mine. And The Griffin was about this guy who had been off fighting in wars for this, and he comes back home and realizes home isn't ready for him anymore. And again, this is very, you can see there's a lot of echoes. I'm not telling the same story, but I'm telling a story that has a reminiscent in many ways of The Griffin. And I love that comic. And the art was also excellent. If I could draw, I would draw it just like that, but I can't. And then I'm inspired by a ton of things, largely, you know, and this is going to sound terrible. I get most inspired when I find something that kind of bugs me about a story I love.
No, yeah, for sure.
Like there's a plot hole in a story that I love, and that makes me want to go write, because it makes me want to write something that keeps the things I love but doesn't have that plot hole or that. The biggest thing I hate is when some character has some power that they don't use. Right? They're trying to conquer the world, but they don't think of using their power in this way that should be pretty obvious to them. And whenever I see stuff like that, I have to go write. So there's like one of those in different play. I don't want to give anything away. I feel like if I keep talking about the part of Invincible that bugs me, there's one thing in Invincible that bugs me, but it happens late in the series, and it's a spoiler. Gotcha. So I feel terrible, but like I can't tell you what it was. But there was something. So I wrote to fix that little tiny flaw.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that. There was this trilogy that I read through Eberron, and I absolutely loved it. The characters are amazing, great story. Get all the way to the end of book 3, and one of the main characters gets overtaken by this artifact, and then they think that he's him, but he's not, and they ended it on a cliffhanger, and they never did anything else. And I was like, you just ruined what would have been an amazing arc and, you know, and story. And I think they were meant to do something after, or another trilogy or something didn't happen. So I think that's literally why I'm like, I'll never do that to somebody. Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of us write. So I definitely understand that aspect.
You know, it sounds like you're insulting the people, the creators you love, and that's not how I mean it. You know, I mean,
no.
There's so many different things that go into a novel, and so many things that will irritate so many different. So you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
You know, no one can, right? There's always going to be some of there are people who don't like Malazan. Otherwise, normal people. They seem normal to the outside, you know, but they're like, oh, I can't stand it. You don't understand what's going on. I'm like, that's the whole point, you know. Anyway, so yeah. So, but I my whole magic system was built on conversations I had with an old friend who became an economics professor, and he was bugged by magic. It's just like, well, if this country has wizards, and wizards are so powerful, why don't they have build giant schools and train up all the next generation of kids, many of them to be wizards, and make an army and conquer all their neighbors? And if your magic system, if your setting doesn't have a really good explanation for why that hasn't happened, why someone hasn't done that and conquered the world, it would bug the crap out of it. And I'm like,
Yeah, that's fair.
Ooh, that's a good point. Why wouldn't that have happened? Someone would have just been greedy and wanting to take over people. You can't tell me no one wanted to take over the world in history of this setting. So why didn't they do that? So you need an answer. So you have to, if I ever have a magic system, I make sure there's a response to that. There are limitations built in. So, all trying to avoid these childhood friend getting angry at me for fundamental mistakes.
Or maybe you're Glenn Cook and you wrote where that country did do it, or those wizards did do it.
But I'm actually rereading Black Company with a group of friends on Discord right now, and he's so good.
Oh, yeah.
Such good stuff. And what I really like about it is he's got a hard magic system in Black Company, but he doesn't really explain it ever.
Yep.
It's a hard it's a rule-based system, because if you talk to one wizard, they kind of know what all the other ones can do. You can say to one guy, look, that guy's much tougher than you, but can he do X, Y, and Z? And no, that's not possible. That he could do, but it would cost him a lot of energy, whatever. So it's clear there are rules.
Yeah.
But as the reader, you don't know what they are. Yep. But it doesn't matter. You definitely feel there's limits to everything and constraints. I love the way he does that. Yeah, it was a big influence on me. Was Glenn Cook. So.
So we'll go with that last one there. Do you have any news, updates, promos, anything like that you'd like?
Are we short on time, or did you want to talk about representation?
Oh, I'm running a little short on time. I was thinking of doing, so I'd love to have you back for free. So I was thinking of actually putting that and a couple of better form questions for it in there.
No, that works perfectly good. I have Wistful Ascending, which I have right here, is available right now on Amazon in ebook and paperback. Oh man, Chris McGrath, so good. So good.
Other than Felix, he's my favorite. They're both neck and neck right now.
So good. Love both of them. So good. Book 2, Return of the Griffin, also ebook, paperback, hardcover. I am having an audiobook of Wistful Ascending made. Hopefully end of August, the audiobook. The guy's in contract. He's going over the manuscript now. It'll be available on Audible. I don't have a release date. It's just I'm not that organized. When it's done, I'll put it out there and I'll tell people on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. Facebook, I have a webpage, jcmberne.com, and book 3 should be out by September, but if it's not, I'm so sorry.
Don't quote us. It's okay.
It is written, and I'm waiting on a cover, but I never know how long something will come up. I'm buying a house, and I just lost my card in a flood. I've had a very strangely eventful few months. So, sometimes things have to take a back burner to other stuff.
Yep. Definitely understand that.
It was so nice to speak to you, Daniel. This was fantastic.
I'm really excited. I started having other questions in my mind because we got through quite a few, and I was got to other things. I was like, oh, this is gonna be really good for another interview. And it's nice that you get book 3 out.
Write them down. You promised me on Twitter I was gonna be your co-host.
Yeah. We can.
I just remembered that conversation.
Yeah, I told we should totally do that. I've been looking for someone else to come in and do guest spots and stuff. So we should.
I would love
definitely talk about doing that for the fall in particular, since we're same time zone. So
I love to talk about writing, and my wife does not.
Yes, I know that.
She doesn't care about any of this at all. Will not read my books. Lovely woman, does not care about science fiction or fantasy. She does not care about Malazan. So I'll talk anytime. I'm more than happy to have a conversation about these things.
I definitely know that feeling. Well, I will definitely be hitting you up, on Twitter and things like that. We could definitely discuss that.
I'd love to. Where I am.
I've been wanting a guest host for a long time, so I feel like that'd be really
fantastic.
Really fun. Well, awesome. Well, I just want to remind our audience here to make sure that you're checking out Joe's descriptions here, make sure you're going and, you're waiting on book 3, but why don't you go buy book 1 and 2? And then once you're done with that, feel free to then do what I do and listen to the audiobooks as well. That way you'll have some time, to get prepared, and you'll know everything about book 1 and 2 and be ready and prepared for book 3. So
there you go.
Joe, again, I
Sounds
want to
good.
thank you for coming on. And I, as
Thank you,
always, I
Daniel.
look forward to talking to you on Twitter, my friend.
Excellent. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
Yep. You have a good rest of the Sunday, and I will talk to you later, bud.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.